So earlier today, it was announced that Colin Trevorrow is out on directing Star Wars Episode 9. Him and Disney have parted ways, probably because of the poor reception of the Book of Henry. And so now I'm going to do what the internet does and speculate on possible directors to replace him. So I made a list of 20 directors. They're not ranked worst to best or anything like that. I put them in different categories. And so I'm going to have, I think, 6 different categories. I'll pick my favorite out of each one of those categories. And then at the very end, I will tell you my final pick for who I think should do it and what should happen. But as I'm talking, you tell me your kind of favorite picks and which people you don't want to do it. Who do you think would be great? Who do you think would be terrible? With that said, let's just dive into this. So the first category is going to be the obvious picks. So the obvious picks for me would be the guys that have already been hired to direct Star Wars movies and already directed Star Wars movies. So J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson, and Gareth Edwards. They're the obvious picks. They've already worked through the system. The movies have been made. 2 of these guys, they've already been released. They've already been very profitable. So they're pretty obvious picks. So what do I think about each one of these guys? J.J. Abrams, I'm a really big fan of J.J. Abrams. I like what he brings to the table. But what he brings to the table is kind of this roller coaster ride. And based off of Alias, based off of Lost, based off kind of even what he did with Star Trek, he's much better at starting things. He's much better at building the mystery box than landing it, answering the questions, kind of coming to conclusions. So J.J. Abrams wouldn't be a horrible pick for me, but he's not known for landing the ship very well. So him closing out the trilogy doesn't sound like a great pick to me. Rian Johnson, I just have to see Last Jedi before I can really pick. I just don't really know. And with Gareth Edwards, there was just so much trouble on the Rogue One set, so many reshoots, rewriting the script afterwards. He played ball, so they probably like working with him. But based on the fact that we saw a trailer and none of that footage was in the movie, and like we're hearing 40% of the movie was reshot, he just doesn't strike me as a great pick simply because I don't know that he delivered to the best of kind of what they're needing. He doesn't seem like a particularly safe pick. So if I had to pick between these 3 guys, I would probably, based off the knowledge I have right now, I would go J.J. Abrams. After Last Jedi comes out, very easily could swap that out for Rian Johnson. Moving on to our next category, this is going to be the safe picks, the guys that I kind of perceive as really obvious people that could come in there, whether their history working with the people seem like safe, obvious picks. My 3 picks for the safe ones are Jon Favreau, Iron Man, Jungle Book, so long history with Disney, with blockbusters, lots of different types of storytelling. Second one is Brad Bird. So he did Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, and then he's done a bunch of Pixar movies, so he's got a history with Disney. He was actually my pick to do The Force Awakens back in the day. He had Tomorrowland, so a little iffy on that, but very solid resume besides Tomorrowland. Third one would be Steven Spielberg. Obviously, he's been the guy that people have been dreaming to do a Star Wars movie for a long time. So what are my thoughts on these? I think Jon Favreau is a great pick. Just his history with Marvel. He's a good company man that has good rapport with a lot of people. He's done some amazing movies. You'd have to postpone The Last Jedi most likely because he's working on The Lion King. So you just say, we're going to push it back a year. We're going to make a safe pick. We like the director, so the release date we're not as locked in on. But I think he'd be a great pick just because of the resume he has, the diversity, and the relationships that he has. Brad Bird, like I said, he was my pick for The Force Awakens. Tomorrowland has me a little bit wishy-washy on him, but he's going to finish up on The Incredibles 2 shortly. So I think he's another very solid pick. That's kind of why I put him in the safe category. And moving on to Steven Spielberg, he hasn't done anything fun in a while. So I got to see Rogue One to see if old man Spielberg still has the energy of young man Spielberg. The same thing that would have made Steven Spielberg an amazing pick back in the 80s isn't true today because he's become old man and a certain edge is gone and a certain sense of fun, I think, is gone. Not that he's not a great director, but he's just not the same guy he was before. So if I had to pick between these 3 guys, They're all very solid, safe picks, but I would go Jon Favreau. He's still got enough edge. He's a seasoned professional. He's got great connections, and I think he's delivered some amazing, amazing stuff. Next category, I'm going to call these the newcomers. They're not necessarily guys that have only done one movie. Well, one of them's done one movie, one of them's done a couple of movies, but they're both guys that kind of have one blockbuster behind them, and so their names just now kind of being spread out there. So my kind of two picks in this category are Jon Watts, who did Spider-Man Homecoming, and Tim Miller, who did Deadpool. So Tim Miller, we'll go with him. So, I mean, kind of out of nowhere, he does Deadpool. Well, long history of kind of special effects work. He's been in the industry a long time. Directs his first movie and just kind of really knocks it out of the park with a fun, a wacky movie with a crazy sense of humor, the hard edge to it while still being accessible. And then on Jon Watts, you got this guy that went from directing a movie about a cop car to directing a Spider-Man movie. It was just a really fun movie. That's kind of what I thought about Spider-Man Homecoming. Just a ton of fun. And so both of these guys are interesting picks. Tim Miller, I don't know if he fits Star Wars, but he's kind of one of those out-of-the-box picks that you just don't know what you're going to get, and that can be amazing, or that can go really, really bad. He'd be like another he'd be another Lord and Miller kind of pick where you go, let's get that guy that's hot, trendy, that did something awesome and roll the dice on it. Whereas Jon Watts, what he did with Spider-Man Homecoming, you do give him there's someone to get him a more mature script. He brings the fun for it. That could go nicely. If I had to pick between those two guys, what would be interesting, I would roll the dice on Tim Miller. It's outside the box. I don't know what they would do, because just what his resume is just so kind of niche, and just this one movie that he's directed, and it was Deadpool. But if they want to roll the dice again and do another Lord and Miller, which obviously ended very badly, but Tim Miller, there you go. There's a pick for that one. Next two on my list, I'm going to call these the Fast and Furious picks because they've directed Fast and Furious movies. So Justin Lin directed like 4 Fast and Furious movies, and then he directed the last Star Trek movie. And that Star Trek movie was very well received by the people that saw it. Now, not a ton of people saw it, but the people that did enjoyed it. He's also the guy that, he directed some of the weaker Fast and Furious movies, and then he's the guy that revitalized it and brought us kind of 2 of the favorites of that franchise. So he knows how to bring the fun. And doing Fast and the Furious crazy fun, you have the limitation of physics, and so you just go into stupid ridiculousness when you do fun in that category. Now give him the Star Wars toy box, and suddenly that stuff's not, you can do things that defy physics because you got the Force, and you got spaceships, and you got lightsabers. So there's a side to that just sounds like a lot of fun. The other one we got in here is James Wan. So James Wan, of course, has Saw, Conjuring movies. He's working on Aquaman, but he also did a Fast and the Furious movie. And he's the guy that had to make a movie when one of his lead actors died in the middle of production, and he still was able to put together a movie that kind of worked. You could see that he was limited in what he could work with, but he pulled it off. And so you got a couple different options there. There are guys that have made really fun movies. James Wan, very diverse a set of movies, but he hasn't quite done sci-fi yet. Justin Lin, having done a Star Trek movie, that's what J.J. Abrams' kind of stepping stool to doing Star Trek was. So if I got to go between these two guys, I respect James Wan a little bit more and think he's the better director of the two. Justin Lin is the one that has had the J.J. Abrams path to Star Wars. So they're probably, I call them about equal in my mind. More likely would be Justin Lin. I think my pick would be James Wan in that category, though. All right, moving on to my next category. These are the hipster picks. I didn't have a better term for it, but these are kind of the pretentious picks for the guys that they want like one of these intellectual type director guys, more so than thinking about who's actually likely to do one of these movies. So pick number one is Denis Villeneuve. Second one, James Mangold, who just did Logan, and number 3, George Miller. So out of the box picks. Now imagine if any one of those guys actually did a Star Wars movie, actually an episodic Star Wars movie. You'd have the headiest one, Denis Villeneuve did it. You'd have the, I don't know, the most Western one if James Mangold. That seems like more like that's the Obi-Wan movie that we want to see, is James Mangold doing that one. And George Miller would be the insane weird one. Imagine George Miller with his creative wacky designs doing a Star Wars movie. Now that would be interesting. That would be an interesting thing to see. Now if I had to go between those picks, Denis Villeneuve just doesn't seem to fit Star Wars, at least not the main episodic ones, because he hasn't done fun yet. You haven't done just any of that sort of thing to it, so it doesn't feel like the right person to me. James Mangold feels more like a spin-off guy, and George Miller just seems so crazy, and he's done things like Babe before, and he did those Penguin movies, so he's done family movies, he's done fun, because Mad Max movies are a ton of fun. Dark, weird, creepy, but some of Star Wars is dark, weird, and creepy. If I got to pick from these categories of people in my hipster category, I think I'm going to go with George Miller on that one. All right, and our final category, I'm going to go with the fan favorites. These are the guys that get their names thrown out there for every big project, or if they don't yet, it's because they've been so busy with what they've been working on. But these are the guys, this is the list that you see all the time for everything. So number 1 on the fan favorites is the Russo Brothers. Number 2 is James Gunn. Number 3, Patty Jenkins. Number 4, Christopher Nolan. Number 5, Joss Whedon. Number 6, Matthew Vaughn. And number 7, Matt Reeves. Now let's kind of fly through these real quick. Some of these fan favorites. The Russo brothers seem, I hadn't even thought about this when I started doing research to do this video, and their name kind of came up and I went, yeah, I really like that. Especially, well, I haven't seen Infinity War yet. Infinity War, if it kind of woos me, it kind of wows me, I could be very much on board with this one. But these are guys, their last 2 movies, very solid. They're working with Disney through Marvel, so they got the relationships. They know how to work with big ensembles. We saw that in Civil War. That's a solid pick right there. Next one on there was James Gunn. This one to me feels a little bit kind of like how JJ went from Star Trek to Star Wars. It feels a little bit how Joss Whedon went from Marvel over to Disney. And the idea of James Gunn going from Guardians of the Galaxy over to Star Wars seems kind of obvious and kind of like, ooh, can you do that? Now, here's the problem. He said he's doing Guardians 3, so I don't think he's available. But in a certain ways, I think he's done the best Star Wars movie since Return of the Jedi in doing Guardians of the Galaxy, and so he seems like an obvious pick at the same time. If the universe were to come together that he was available, I'd be really into that pick. I kind of put him off the list because it's not even like with some of these guys have been working on movies that you could just delay a year. It feels like there's actual overlap between Episode 9 and Guardians 3, so I think he's out. Number 3, Patty Jenkins, coming off Wonder Woman. She's done the big blockbuster. She is red hot right now, and picking her as someone to do a Star Wars movie, that could be a very cool pick that would get a lot of people really excited. You want to get rid of all your bad press from having more directors falling out? You get Patty Jenkins. She's not locked in for Wonder Woman yet, so you could still snatch her up real quick and make that happen. So that could be very interesting. And I mean, you watch, well, I guess you got the Chris Pine factor. J.J. Abrams brings Star Trek back with Chris Pine. Patty Jenkins brings Wonder Woman to the screen with Chris Pine. It seems like a sign. Divine symbol right there. Providence, that's the word I'm looking. Providence, we're supposed to go with Patty Jenkins. Number 4, Christopher Nolan. He's the hipster pick. You're supposed to say Christopher Nolan. You can look on my comments on my previous video on this. A bunch of people saying Christopher Nolan. I don't see the fit. It's not, I mean, I love Christopher Nolan. I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan as much as, I mean, anybody else. I love his stuff and what he's been doing and what he's added to the world of movies. But it's a matter of fit, and what makes something distinctly Nolan, what he brings to the table, is that what also fits nicely with what makes for a good Star Wars movie. Now, if you told me we're talking about a spin-off movie and you said Christopher Nolan and they're going to let him Christopher Nolan the Star Wars universe, I'd go, yeah, go for it. But the episode movies, there's a thing that makes them Star Wars episode movies, and I don't think you should change that. There's a side to it. It should kind of work like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where there's kind of a template and a tone for them. That's what the episodic movies really should be, and I would very fight for that. Let's go nuts on, let's stop doing spin-off movies about our favorite characters from our childhood with the spin-off movies. Let Christopher Nolan do some insane thing, do his time jump types, all that stuff. But as for Episode 9, I just don't see it as a good fit at all. Like, I mean, just with the types of movie he does, the lack of humor or the minimalistic humor, the tone of them, it's just not Star Wars. Next one on there is Joss Whedon. He seems so tied down to DC right now. It seems so unlikely that the timing would work. He was pretty blunt in his negative statements after doing Age of Ultron. He's probably burned some bridges there, so I don't think his connections to Marvel are very good. And he's kind of a dick on Twitter, so he's doesn't necessarily come off like the greatest guy. I used to be a huge fan of his, and he's kind of burned so many bridges by running his mouth over the last few years. I've been way down on him the last 2 years or so. And it's not even because I mean I was fine with Age of Ultron, but he's just run his mouth, burned bridges, talking bad about people and other sorts of stuff that was just very has burned me. If they told me Joss Whedon's doing a Star Wars movie, I'd be like, all right, rein him in. Don't get so quippy. Rein in the quips. But overall, it's not a horrible pick. I don't love it. Matthew Vaughn. There's an outside the box guy with a lot of style. His name gets thrown around. He's tons of fun. Certainly would bring a little bit of his own flavor to it. He's done ensemble work. You look at First Class. So I'm a big fan of his. So I could be very down for a Matthew Vaughn one. I don't know if he'd do it though, just because of the types of stuff he seems like he works towards. But that could be very interesting. And the final fan favorite that people talk about all the time and have been declaring for everything would be Matt Reeves. After the Planet of the Apes movies, people are in love with this guy. I'm in love with this guy. Hey, look, a poster for his movie right behind my head. Huge fan of his. I'd go back to the same thing I said about Christopher Nolan. The tone doesn't fit. You tell me he's doing a spin-off movie, I'm with you. The tone of his movies fits something else. Fits Batman. I would love to see him do a Batman movie. Hey, wait, he is going to do the Batman movie. He's probably way too busy to do a Star Wars movie. But, I mean, you told me he's going to do a spin-off movie in 2022. I'm on board. I love that idea. Episodic movie, his tone doesn't fit. I'm not on board for it. So if I look at my fan favorites, who am I going to pick out of this one? The slightly safer pick, I think, is Russo Brothers, but the fun pick is Patty Jenkins. I think I'm going to jump on the Patty Jenkins train and go Patty Jenkins. So if I go for my top 7 picks out of there, we got Patty Jenkins, George Miller. I think I went James Wan, Tim Miller, and Jon Favreau were kind of my picks out of the bunch, my top 7 picks. Where I'm going to land on this one? I think Jon Favreau is the obvious safe pick that would make a very solid Star Wars movie that you wouldn't have issues with him. He gets the job done. Give him the time to make the script. Like even Iron Man 2, he wanted another year. They told him he only had 2 years, and that's why the script wasn't so great on that one. I don't blame him for that movie. I thought he did his job on Iron Man 2. I love Jon Favreau's movies. I think I'm a big fan of his. Not to say they're all perfect, but I'm a very big fan of what he does. He is my pick to direct Episode 9. Delay it a year, let him finish his Jungle Book movie, and let him play in the Star Wars universe. But how about you? You tell me yours down in the comment section. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Get a lively discussion. I gave you 20 different people to pick from. Let's see where all this lands. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, ranking videos. Right now I'm talking a lot of Star Wars because I love Star Wars. You can tell from the stuff behind me. And we got some big Star Wars news today, so there's a lot to talk about in regards to Star Wars. So if you want to talk Star Wars, want to talk movies, please consider clicking that subscribe button, and thank you so much for watching.